Hey guys, we are back. Once again, we have Michelle Cohan.
Hi, everyone.
Hey everybody, Robert Greenblatt here. Today, Michelle and I are going to take a couple of minutes and talk to you about not just the importance of a home inspection, because we've chatted about that kind of stuff before, but what is a home inspector going to be looking at and what matters and what doesn't matter. So I think the very first thing that we want to share with you is it's really important to understand that the home inspector doesn't read the sales contract and the home inspector doesn't know what's going to be important to you as a buyer or not important to you. In general terms, the sales contract says health or safety defects, right, Michelle? Like generally, that's kind of how there's about 2 pages devoted to that in the sales contract, but basically it's health or safety defects. But what's important to understand is you're hiring that home inspector if you're buying a house, and that home inspector's job is to find everything that can be found and to educate you about your new house to the best of your ability, right? So, Michelle, let's share with everyone these 3 different categories, I
Sure.
guess, categories of, in general, what we see on how home inspectors tend to break down their reports. What would be the most important category?
So, the most important category is the safety and hazard category that
Yep. Yep.
stuns people, but that's the most important.
Yeah. And they may, depending on the software, they may kind of package it differently, right? We don't know. Like safety hazards,
Right.
defects, immediate attention. Usually it's in red.
Yeah.
Right? But those are the kind of things that you probably want to focus on. But keep in mind that home inspector may or may not be an alarmist,
Right.
right? So, what would be a couple of examples of things that would require immediate attention and that most people would certainly consider a hazard or defect that needs to be handled?
Sure. A big one's mold. Whether there's mold in the bathroom or mold from a leaky roof in the attic. That's huge.
It can be, but here's the other interesting thing about mold, right? So it's an ugly 4-letter word in real estate. Mold, uh, the home inspector can't really like taste it and know that it's mold,
Nasty.
right? I mean, they're pretty good about eyeballing stuff,
Yeah.
but in reality, to know that it's actually mold usually requires a specific mold test by a
Right.
specific mold specialist.
Right.
Probably another video coming on that, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So what you'll see in those reports is they will call it a microbial substance, right?
Word for it.
Yeah, they come up with these fancy words. They usually can tell based on the circumstances that it's probably a mold. In many cases, it's not that big of a deal to clean up, but it is a potential health hazard for sure, right? So mold's a big one. What else would be something that we see a lot, or something that kind of rises to the top of those concerns on these reports?
A leaky roof. I mean, that's a big one.
Hmm. Yeah,
People are very touchy when it comes to the roof on the house.
they are
Yeah.
definitely very touchy. A roof is an expensive item.
Mhm.
Sometimes the leak is very simple. A lot of times, what I've seen on home inspections reports are the plumbing boot, which is where the vent stacks exit the roof. Over
Sure.
time, they deteriorate before the roof actually deteriorates. A little water seeps in. Homeowner has no idea, because it's not like there's a deluge of water coming in through the ceiling or even a water stain. But it is something that should be addressed because it'll only get worse over time.
Sure.
The flip side of that is, what if the roof is really, really old and is leaking and it's just kind of can't be fixed at that point, right? So that's potentially a really big issue. My opinion, roofs are like the biggest thing that come up on home inspections because nobody ever wants to pay for a roof.
Oh, it's so expensive. It's
It's no,
ridiculous.
yeah, it's no fun. So roof, mold, what else could be a big concern that comes up in a home inspection?
How about a heater that's, you know, pushing out CO? That's
Yeah,
that's an issue.
yep, yep, absolutely. So a defective heater not just not working properly, but literally defective, a cracked heat exchanger. Again, I mean, I'm giving an extreme example, but I've seen it. A
Hmm.
cracked heat exchanger can be very dangerous in the house, and a cracked heat exchanger is not repairable to the best of my knowledge. So that could be a big problem.
Sure.
Sometimes, they're not working quite right. The flame pattern's a little off, and it can be addressed, right, by an HVAC guy. But a cracked heat exchanger is a bad thing. Those are big things, right? Heater, mold, roof. Those are big, big things. So those are the kind of things, Michelle, right, that we see that's of
Safety.
major.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. A safety hazard requires immediate attention. Sometimes, on those things, we will see, in that category, we'll see other things that fall into that category that admittedly may not be as severe. So something that comes to mind for me is, how about when we see a sidewalk that's a little uneven,
Sure.
right? So that's a trip hazard for sure. I'm not discounting that. Someone could trip over that. But in my opinion, definitely not as important as a cracked heat exchanger,
Absolutely.
right? Sometimes the home inspector will also put in that category the fact that the stove or range doesn't have an anti-tip device. But while that is definitely important, it's not a $10,000 or $20,000 problem either,
It's
right?
easy.
Yeah. So I would say that 70% of the home inspection reports I see, there's no anti-tip device on the stove, right? Almost every house that's been around a while has some sort of unevenness in the walkways out front.
The
Almost
other
every.
thing, GFCIs.
Oh, yeah, that's a good
That's
one.
always in there.
Yeah, guys, if you're watching this, you're not sure what a GFCI is. It's the outlets that have the little button, and it's supposed to be within 10 feet of any water source.
Right.
And it's trickier than that, right? Because sometimes the way that, like in a kitchen, they may be connected to each other. And if they are connected to each other, if one of them has it, the others kind of automatically have it the
Right.
way if it's wired properly, even though you may not see the little button on each one. So that can get a little tricky. And it's my understanding too, they actually have circuit breakers that can handle that water protection. So sometimes you don't see it at all, but a good home inspector will be able to make sense out of that. Again, probably not as severe as a roof or a
Right.
mold or a bad heater, but those are things that could show up in those categories. But it's important as a buyer that you kind of weigh this, right? The other thing that we see from a category standpoint on home inspections are things to budget for, right? They will talk about like, hey, this is okay for now,
But
but
eventually.
what?
But eventually.
But yeah, there you go. But eventually, you probably want to budget for this. So, what could be an example of something that they're going to budget for as a new homeowner?
And again, same, we'll go back to the roof again. The roof eventually has to be fixed. It's at the end of its life, which
Yep.
is 25, 30 years.
Yep. So, right, guys, depending on the roof, right? If it's a three tab, is it three tab? Yeah, the three tab shingles are 20 to 25 years typically. The dimensional shingles could be 25 to 30. Those are the two most popular types that we see.
Right.
So, let's say it's a three tab shingle and it's 18 years old and it's okay. But the home inspector may say, but eventually you should
You'll need
probably, yeah, you don't need it this year, but in another couple of years, you might,
Mhm.
or a good storm could accelerate that process. So that's actually a really important piece that we've talked about before on this channel, which is the roof is okay. It's getting older. It doesn't mean the seller has to fix it for you.
Right. Right.
It's not defective. Just because you're buying a used house, in most cases in our service area, it's a used house.
Mhm.
So a used house, it's like a used car. It's going to be okay. So like if you change the oil 2,500 miles ago and you're supposed to change it every 3,000 miles.
You have about 500 more miles to go.
Exactly. It's the same kind of thing, right? So I think that kind of stuff is important for us to recognize. And then the other thing that home inspectors will point out are maintenance items, especially if you're a first-time home buyer.
Yeah.
There's a lot you're going to learn. That's why we actually encourage you as a buyer to be there with the home inspector, because that home inspector is also going to show you things, teach you things about your house. So maintenance items. So you've been a homeowner for a long time. I've been a homeowner for a
Yeah.
long time. What kind of stuff comes up on a regular basis that you just kind of have to deal with when you own a house?
Gutters. I mean, if you have landscaping around you, if you have trees around you, eventually you're going to have to clean those gutters. You're going to have to pull back
Yeah.
the trees a little bit and cut those down. You don't want them on the, hanging over the roof or up against your siding.
Yeah, the trees keep on growing, right?
Yeah.
I've got a tree guy coming to my house next week. Got to cut down some more trees. I like trees, but sometimes they're a little too close to the house, or they've gotten a little too big, and they need to be cut back. The gutters get clogged. Gutters need to be cleaned out
Right.
regularly, depending on how you're set up. Now, how close
Also,
are the trees to your house, right?
like ductwork,
What?
ductwork in your house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, ductwork. If you have, especially if you have a lot of pets,
Mhm.
right? So the heating and air conditioning system will push and pull air through, and for safety reasons, you want to have that cleaned periodically, right? So that's not a defect. That's just ongoing maintenance. That's a great example.
How
How
about your
about
dryer vent? That too.
Yep. What about caulking?
Yeah.
Caulking, there's a lot of different maintenance items for caulking. We can, caulking the exterior of windows to keep them sealed tight from water and from drafts. Caulking tubs and around sinks.
Right.
I've said it forever. 3 words: water is evil.
It is. It's so cool. It's
Water
great.
is evil. I've had my experiences with water professionally and personally, and water is always trying to go somewhere that we don't want it.
So true. True.
But we need it, right? We
It
need
is.
it. So those are things that are maintenance items that you're just going to want to keep your eye on. So when you're a homeowner, those are kind of things that, hey, congratulations, you bought a house. And with that purchase comes some extra responsibilities,
Mhm.
right? I think in summary on this one, Michelle, I think what most people just need to understand, and I think a lot of people do, is that no home is perfect.
Not one. Even a new home is not perfect.
Correct. I've sold new construction, and we've had inspections done, and they've still found a few odds and ends. Typically, the newer the house, the better it is. However, it's not always the case.
Yeah.
So that's important. So I think these are all important things to keep in mind when you're getting a home inspection done, right? What's the difference between a real concern that has to be addressed immediately versus a maintenance item versus something to budget for,
And
right?
it can all be scary to somebody buying a house. So as an agent, we have to kind of temper down that nervousness and
Mhm.
explain each one.
Yeah, yeah, that anxiety,
Mhm.
putting it in perspective is really important. A lot of the terminology will be brand new to you as a
Right.
first-time home buyer, for sure. If you've never owned a home before, it can definitely seem overwhelming. And one of the things I like to say to people, especially if we're standing outside after a home inspection and they're really nervous, um, I'll say, "Hey, look this way. Look over there. Look that way." Every single house here at some point was purchased by somebody in this neighborhood, right? Everybody's been through the same feelings that you have right now, and it's perfectly normal to feel that way.
Mhm.
And we're all going to go through that. And the magic of it is you can only be a first-time home buyer one
One
time.
time. That's so true. One time.
One,
That's it.
one time. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a wrap.
That is a
What do you
wrap.
think? All right, awesome. Well, guys, thank you for joining us today. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel, like this video. It really helps us grow, and we will be back again real soon.